Hey everyone, Mike Miller with the Herald Times, coming to you from Trust Me on this one. We're in State College, bringing you the most informal Scoop Talk possibly in the history of Scoop Talk, or at least dating back to some of the Scoop Talks Dustin did in Omaha, I think it was, for the College World Series. But myself and Herald Times photographer Chris Howell, we are hanging out at our hotel room in State College. Not great internet at the Bryce Jordan Center. Really not great anything at the Bryce Jordan Center, if I'm being completely honest. So we're back here shooting this real quick before we wrap up for the day. A 78-75 Indiana win, last second win on a James Blackman Jr. three-pointer. Just a wow, yeah, that happened. And it happened, it nearly didn't happen. It was nearly a collapse of frankly pretty epic proportions. Indiana was leading up by 14 points with about 9 minutes left in regulation. But a late Penn State charge, coupled with the fact that Indiana was without two of its most important players in Juwan Morgan and OG Anunoby, who we'll get to in just a moment. It was a concerning end to the game for an Indiana team that, again, still trying to find its identity, still trying to learn how to win games, close games, what have you. This one nearly slipped away, and it's nearly slipped away in very concerning fashion. Instead, Indiana called on the watch shot play, same play call that they used in 2011 to beat Kentucky. A little different here, same idea, different end of the court. There's no trailer involved, but of the same play, Thomas Bryant sets a screen just over midcourt. Really deflected two Penn State guys from getting to Blackman before he could set up for his shot. He hits the shot, set up. He had 4.6 seconds to basically run the length of the court. Got where he needed to be, set up, positioned himself well, and let it fly. And he was on his butt, staring up at the basket as the ball went through the net. And at that point, as you saw, I'm sure by this point, Indiana's entire bench spilled on the court. James Blackman Jr. doing one of these things, trying to hush a Penn State crowd that frankly wasn't that loud to begin with, but a Penn State crowd nonetheless, and a Penn State team that was just kind of standing there in stunned silence at the end of this one. Again, a 78-75 win for Indiana, which has now won 3 of their last 4, 2 in a row, and returns home to Bloomington on Saturday to host Michigan State. The question now is who starts, who's available. Juwan Morgan traveled with the team. He was here in State College. However, he was wearing a boot, I believe, on his left foot. Did not dress. Obviously, he was not cleared to play. I think it was on pregame radio. Tom Crean did say, however, that he's day-to-day, getting better, but just not at that point where they're ready to clear him. So we'll see if that process is in any way accelerated or just ready to go by the time Saturday rolls around. Again, it's a pretty quick turnaround. But they're going to need a guy like Juwan Morgan, especially considering what looks to be a pretty significant injury. That's just what looks. Again, we don't have any update or confirmation on exactly what happened to OG Anunoby right before halftime, but it was a non-contact deal. We saw in the replay his knee did appear to buckle as he fell to the floor. Really a scary situation. He was just writhing in pain. It was not at all what you want to see from one of your most important players. He was helped to the locker room by Juwan Morgan and strength and conditioning coach Lyle Anderson right before he did go into that locker room. Tom Crean was over there and just kind of consoling him. It was very difficult moment. You could tell for everyone involved, for the two of them, Crean and Anunoby. The whole team had rushed over to that end of the court, and I think it had confused at least one Penn State assistant who exchanged words with Crean prior to running into their locker room. What it sounds like, there was some sort of mix-up. I guess the Penn State assistant didn't realize that Anunoby had kind of fallen to the floor injured and was wondering why Indiana's entire team was charging at Penn State right before the halftime. Locker rooms are on different sides of the arena. So Crean, in some words, some way, explained the situation. Clearly wasn't happy, though. I will say I did see him walk out right after halftime, and he was just staring daggers at that Penn State bench. I think it was Penn State's director of operations, I don't have his name in front of me, who Crean had spoken to, but that same Penn State staffer had actually gone over to IU's bench, Just before the start of the second half, he shook hands with Chuck Martin and apparently apologized or explained the situation and said, "Hey, you explain this to Coach Crean. And, this is what I was seeing. This I didn't realize someone was hurt." So that was that whole scene. But again, a very scary situation for Indiana and OG Anunoby, who we don't know any specifics at all. All we know is that he was in the locker room crying at halftime. Tom Crean was visibly shaken, choked up, talking with BTN after the game, explaining the situation, as best I guess he could at that point, just saying, he was in the locker room with OG, who was very upset, tried to explain what he had felt, what had happened in that moment. It was just, a non-contact situation, and he was clearly very upset in the locker room, crying, and just clearly scared and worried about what might be down the road. We won't know more until, I guess, at least Thursday, once the team's back in Bloomington. They're able to run some tests and examinations on OG Anunoby, but until then, just a very scary situation for Indiana to weather. Another major injury for Indiana when you look at, obviously, Juwan Morgan missing a game here, a game where, I think they certainly could have needed, just one of the steadiest players they have. They could use him at any point, but especially here, going against a Penn State team that's a little charged up. They're punchy and plucky, and they've usually been so, but they got a little bit more skill around them now too. So this was a game that you would have probably liked to have seen Juwan Morgan involved in, but clearly couldn't go. You add that to the list of injuries that have struck this team at certain points this year. Some of them minor, some of them not. Obviously, Colin Hartman's comes to mind. He and Juwan Morgan were side by side on the bench together in street clothes. So that'll be something to monitor for Indiana. The good news is Indiana did get some much-needed production from guys like James Blackman Jr., Robert Johnson, and Thomas Bryant. All of them finished with 17 points each. I think Blackman and Johnson combined for 8 3-pointers. Bryant added 9 rebounds and really did a nice job setting that screen at the end to allow Blackman to get the shot off with half a second to spare. So from here, Indiana again returns home against Michigan State, and that's really where you try to cash in on a game like this. It's an Indiana team, again, that is still learning how to win, learning how to close these games out as they're currently constructed. But you do kind of wonder, is this maybe a moment where suddenly you go from wondering, all right, is this really going to collapse? Is this game really falling apart? Is Indiana really going to blow a 14-point lead to Penn State? To hitting a big shot, running around the court and just total jubilation and just living in that moment. I mean, is that maybe where things kind of turn for this team? I don't know. We'll see. I mean, certainly if you're going to be without OG Anunoby for any extended period of time, it'll be tough. But again, they've got 2 wins. They're going to get Michigan State at home, and then from there they got back-to-back road games at Michigan, Northwestern. Certainly winnable. You can certainly get at least one of those and still feel pretty good about yourself, given the fact that you are where you are right now. But you do wonder what this night, what this ending, just kind of the ability to kind of fight through things, both injuries, both sloppiness, carelessness late in the game, the ability to kind of pull out a win like they did. What's the impact of that moving forward? How do they allow that to register and manifest itself as they close out the month of January and head into again another critical month of February? All the games are important from here. Just given the hole that they dug for themselves early on in Big Ten play with those 3 losses, Nebraska, Wisconsin, and Maryland. So this was a game Indiana absolutely, really, truly needed. I mean, you go to a place like Penn State. Granted, Penn State's better. They're more skilled. They're better put together. But, the margin for error in general has been really slimmed for this team. But you gotta get some road wins along the way, and certainly this is a game that Indiana should have been able to get, and they did. It was another not so great start, not so great first half of the first half. I thought it really started to turn once again when you saw some more minutes from guys like Devontae Green, Curtis Jones, Deron Davis, obviously. Deron Davis had his own injury scare about midway late in the second half. I think it was his right foot or ankle. He was down on the court for a little bit, went into the locker room briefly, came back out, actually jogged back out, and must have been taped, or we didn't get a full update on that either after the game. But he was back. That seemed to be a minor situation, so another, just thing to monitor for Indiana, I suppose. But I do think that that freshman trio, just like they did Sunday against Rutgers, kind of gave this team a boost. You look at the box score, you look at the plus minus. Actually, I got it right in front of me and pulled up because I think Indiana only had one guy negative plus minus. No, I'm sorry, they had 1, 2, 3, 4, but the worst of that bunch, the most negative of that bunch, was the negative 13 for Josh Newkirk. Just not getting enough from Josh Newkirk at that point guard position right now. They use Curtis Jones and Devontae Green in spurts, and again, the game really hinged on their ability to come in and impact the game. There was a beautiful play by Devontae Green, who's charging down court in transition, lays off a really pretty skip pass to Thomas Bryant, who takes the ball, sets in a really strong dunk, and that put Indiana ahead for the first time since like the first 3 or 4 minutes. That was, I think, with about 6 minutes to go in the first half. From there, they built. They pushed ahead, had a 44-37 halftime advantage, and moved that to 14 points with about 9 minutes to go. And obviously, a concerning, second half of the second half with some key mistakes. You saw some, again, as well as Curtis Jones played in moments. He also missed, back-to-back front ends of 1-on-1s. There was some trouble in the inbounds passes. Thomas Bryant turned it over, driving from the perimeter, which was just kind of like, what are you doing? But yet, with some of those mistakes, with some of those dips, Indiana still found a way. What does it mean going forward? We'll see. And the real importance of this game could be seen on Saturday when you get to Michigan State, and potentially you get a win there. You've suddenly won three in a row, 3 of your last 4 or 5 games. So we'll see. Still interesting. Still a lot to follow. We'll keep you updated with the latest we know. I didn't realize I'm already at 12 minutes here. So yeah, we will keep you updated with as much as we know. It's about time to turn the lights out and get ready to head back home. So thanks, guys.